It was total global panic in January 1980. On the floor of the New York Commodities Exchange, traders are sweating through their suits. Phones are screaming. And the price of silver is doing something impossible. In just 12 months, it hasn't just doubled. It has exploded by 700%. You think Bitcoin was volatile? You think the dot-com bubble was crazy? They were nothing compared to this. Because this wasn't an accident. This was a heist. Two eccentric billionaires from Texas, Nelson and William Hunt, had decided to wage war on the US dollar. Their plan was insane. Buy every single ounce of silver on planet Earth. Every bar, every coin, every spoon. And it worked. The world ran dry. Kodak couldn't make film. Tiffany's couldn't make jewelry. The global supply chain was held hostage by two men in cowboy hats. They had the world by the throat. But they made one fatal calculation. They forgot that when you try to bankrupt the government, the house doesn't just play. The house changes the rules. This is the story of the Great Silver Squeeze, and how the US government destroyed two billionaires to save the dollar. To understand the crime, you have to understand the era. The 1970s were a financial nightmare. Inflation was eating the dollar alive. Your cash was losing value every single day. And the Hunt brothers? They hated it. They didn't trust the government. They didn't trust the banks. Bunker Hunt had a famous saying, "Any idiot can run a printing press." He believed paper money was a lie. He wanted something real. But why silver? Because gold was illegal to own in large quantities for decades, and the Hunts believed silver was undervalued. Historically, the ratio was 16-1. In 1979, it was totally broken. They had billions, but even that wasn't enough to corner the market. They needed partners. So, they flew to the desert. They met with Saudi sheikhs who were swimming in oil money. The pitch was simple. The West is printing fake money to pay for your oil. Trade it for silver before it's too late. The alliance was formed. They started buying. And they didn't just buy paper contracts like normal traders. They demanded physical delivery. They flew millions of ounces of silver to Switzerland. They were taking the metal out of the system. The supply was vanishing. The trap was set. The world was about to realize that there were more paper promises than actual silver bars. Here is how the trap worked. Usually, commodities trading is just a game of paper. You buy a contract, wait for the price to go up, and sell the contract. Nobody actually wants 5,000 ounces of silver delivered to their house. But the Hunts? When their contracts expired, they looked at the sellers and said, "We don't want cash. We want the metal. Deliver it." The market panicked. The short sellers, people who had bet the price would go down, didn't actually have the silver. They had sold promises they couldn't keep. They had to go into the open market and buy physical silver at any price just to pay the Hunts. This created a feedback loop. The more they bought, the higher the price went. It wasn't just Wall Street. The real world started to break. Kodak, the film giant, used massive amounts of silver for developing photos. Their costs tripled overnight. Tiffany & Co., the famous jeweler, took out a full-page ad in the New York Times. They didn't advertise jewelry. They wrote a letter condemning the unconscionable hoarding of silver. It got so crazy that ordinary people started melting down their family heirlooms. Grandma's tea set? Melted. Antique coins? Melted. There was a frenzy to find scraps of silver. By January 1980, the price hit $50 an ounce. The Hunts were holding $4.5 billion worth of silver. They were earning $100 million per day. They had won. They had beaten the banks. They had beaten inflation. But they forgot one thing. When you corner the market, you make powerful enemies. And those enemies were about to change the rules of the game. The government stepped in. The exchange officials held an emergency meeting and did something unprecedented. They changed the rules. On January 21st, the COMEX announced Silver Rule 7. It said that traders could no longer buy new silver contracts. They could only sell what they already had. Imagine playing a game of poker, and suddenly the dealer says, "Sorry, you aren't allowed to bet anymore. You can only fold." The buying power vanished instantly. With no one allowed to buy, the price had only one place to go: down. It collapsed. $50, $40, $30. The bubble burst. Then came the phone call every trader fears, the margin call. The Hunts had borrowed heavily to buy that silver. Now the banks wanted their money back. They owed $100 million immediately. They didn't have the cash, they only had silver. But to pay the debt, they had to sell the silver, which drove the price down even further. It spiraled into a death loop. On March 27th, Silver Thursday, the price hit $10. The Hunts had lost over $1 billion in a single week. They had tried to corner the market. Instead, the market cornered them. The richest men in America were suddenly broke. They had to mortgage everything: their oil fields, their cattle, even their Rolex watches, just to pay the bill. The aftermath was brutal. The Hunts were dragged before Congress. They were sued by everyone: the banks, investors, even a Peruvian mining company. To pay off their debts, they had to sell everything: their ancient coin collection, their racehorses, their oil leases. The empire was dismantled piece by piece. When asked by a congressman how much he was worth now, Bunker Hunt famously shrugged and said, "$1 billion isn't what it used to be." The lesson of the silver squeeze is simple but terrifying. You can be the richest man on earth. You can be right about inflation. But you cannot fight the Federal Reserve. The House will always change the rules to survive. Silver never recovered. It took 30 years for the price to even get close to $50 again. They tried to break the system with hard money, but in the end, the paper won. Do you own silver as insurance against the dollar? Or is it just a shiny metal? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you want to see how arrogance and ego cost Ferrari billions of dollars, click here to watch the story of Ferrari and Lamborghini. See you in the next one. Until then, binge watch all the business documentaries on Wealth Whispers and do subscribe.